My name is Alina Pavlenko. I was born in the northern district of Moscow during one of the coldest winters of the decade. According to my mother, even the midwives whispered that I looked like an angel when I cried for the first time. Pale skin, wide hazel eyes, and hair so blonde it was almost white. From the very beginning, I was special. Everyone said it. My teachers, our neighbors, distant relatives I only saw once a year. They all looked at me like I was born for greatness. My mother, Tatiana, called me her golden girl. Not just for my looks, but for everything I did. I learned to read by the time I was 4. Played piano by 5. Won local poetry contests at 6. My father, Sergei, would beam with pride and boast to his friends at the bar. That's my daughter. She'll go to university abroad. She'll become someone. But no one ever asked me what I wanted. At home, things were different. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom flat in a gray Soviet-era apartment block near Yaroslavsky Station. My younger brother, Misha, shared a room with me until I turned 10. He was always quiet, always in the shadows. If I got an A, he got a pat on the back. If I got a B, there was silence. If he got a B, there was scolding.
It was clear who the golden child was.
And it wasn't him. As I grew older, the pressure turned from gentle encouragement to something much heavier. Every success became a requirement. Every smile a performance. I remember once getting second place in a national literature competition. I came home with my silver medal and certificate, proud and breathless. My mother took one look at it and said, "Why not first, Alina?" That night, I cried quietly under the covers while Misha offered me a piece of his chocolate bar. He was only 8 at the time, but even he understood. I began to learn that love in our house was conditional. Love came with achievement, and achievement came with exhaustion. In school, I was admired, envied even. Other girls tried to imitate me. Boys left notes in my locker. Teachers praised my essays and pushed me forward in every opportunity. But none of them saw what was happening beneath the surface. They didn't see the way I bit my nails until they bled. They didn't hear me throw up from stress before an exam. They didn't notice how lonely I was, even when surrounded by applause. Misha, however, saw it all. He never said much, but his eyes followed me everywhere. Quiet, watchful, and something else I couldn't name back then. It was in that silent space between us, between the praised and the ignored, that something began to grow. A tension I couldn't quite understand. And by the time I turned 16, that tension would explode in ways I never expected. By the time I was in my final year at gymnasium, everything about my life looked perfect from the outside. I was head of the literature club, captain of the debating team, and already shortlisted for a scholarship to study at Oxford. My parents walked a little taller whenever they mentioned my name. Tatiana, my mother, had taken to correcting people when they pronounced it wrong. "It is Alina," she would say sharply, as if misnaming me was a personal insult to her pride. At home, though, the cracks were beginning to show. I started waking up at 3 in the morning, heart pounding for no reason. I would sit on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, staring at the cracked mirror, gasping silently as panic twisted inside me. I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't want to be weak. Weakness, in our family, was not an option. Misha was 16 now. Quiet as ever, but taller than me, his shoulders already broad. He had stopped trying to win their approval years ago. Instead, he found comfort in his own small world, drawing in the margins of his notebooks, playing guitar in his room late at night, his soft melodies leaking under the door. He never got in trouble, never spoke out of turn, never tried to take up space. And yet, I began to notice a shift in him. He watched me more. Not with admiration, but with a kind of resigned disappointment. One evening, after dinner, I overheard a conversation between our parents while I was in the corridor. "She's too sensitive lately," my father said. "All this crying, locking herself in her room. She needs to toughen up if she wants to survive abroad." "She'll be fine," Tatiana replied. "She just needs to focus. She's our only hope now. Misha, well, you know how he is." I felt the words like a punch to the stomach. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their investment. The next day, I found Misha sketching by the radiator near the window. I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. He didn't look up. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "A wolf," he said softly. "It's tired." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because it keeps pretending to be a dog." I stared at the paper. The wolf was beautiful, detailed, but its eyes were hollow. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. That night I lay in bed and realized I wasn't just tired. I was drowning. But everyone saw me as the girl who glowed. The golden one. The one who could never fall. So I kept going. I aced my mock exams, wrote a prize-winning essay about the Russian soul, smiled at the camera during the city's youth conference. But inside, I was falling apart piece by piece. The only one who noticed was Misha. He didn't say a word, but his silence spoke louder than applause. And the day everything finally cracked open was closer than I thought. It was a Thursday evening in late November. The wind outside howled like a wounded animal, and flakes of snow danced violently against the windows. Inside, the warmth of the radiator hummed softly, but the air was thick with something unspoken. I had returned home later than usual, having stayed behind to help a classmate prepare for a speech contest. My shoes were soaked through, and my fingers tingled from the cold. As I stepped inside, I heard raised voices from the dining room. "He is not like her. He never was." That was Tatiana. "He is still our son," my father replied, quieter, but his tone sharp like ice. "He drags us down, Oleg. You know it. One rotten branch can spoil the whole tree." I stood in the hallway, clutching my bag, my socks dripping onto the polished wooden floor. I didn't move. I didn't want them to know I was listening. Alina is everything we worked for. Let us not lose sight of what matters. I couldn't hear what my father said next. Just a long silence. Then footsteps. I darted into the bathroom, locking the door just as Oleg passed by. In the mirror, my face looked pale, older, like I had lived 10 years in one breath. When I finally emerged, dinner had already been cleared. Misha sat in the kitchen, alone, chewing absently on a piece of black bread. He looked up at me, eyes unreadable. "Did you hear it?" he asked softly. I nodded. "I always knew," he whispered. "They don't hate me. They just never saw me." I sat beside him. "I see you," I said, and it came out as a promise. He gave a small nod, then placed a folded piece of paper in front of me. "I wrote a song. For you." It was just a few lines. Simple. But it made my throat tighten. That was the night something shifted. A crack deepened. A line was drawn. And yet, none of us knew what was waiting just around the corner. 3 days later, we were invited to the Regional Academic Gala, a formal evening celebrating the city's best students. Tatiana was radiant, finally wearing the sapphire dress she had been saving for a proper occasion. Oleg wore his military medals, polished and gleaming. I wore a modest black gown and the medal I had received for my essay on national identity. When we arrived at the Grand Hall, it was already filled with laughter and champagne. Everyone shook hands, complimented my parents, praised me. No one noticed Misha. He stood near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking like he didn't belong. At dinner, Tatiana leaned over and whispered, "Couldn't he have at least combed his hair?" My cheeks burned, but I said nothing. After dessert, they called my name. I stood beneath the stage lights, gave a short speech about discipline and duty, and watched as cameras flashed. When I returned to my seat, I found Misha gone. I searched the hallway, the balcony, the coat room. He had vanished. We returned home in silence. Tatiana and Oleg praised the evening, already discussing who else had been impressed. I couldn't sleep that night. At 4 in the morning, I found a note under my pillow. It simply said, "Some people live to shine. Some of us were made to burn quietly. I'll be where no one expects me to be." There was no signature. But I knew. Misha was gone. And it was only the beginning. The next morning, the world outside was blanketed in white. The city of Moscow had disappeared beneath a veil of snow, muffling every sound, turning everything still and surreal. But inside me, A storm was raging. Misha had vanished without a trace. No messages. No calls. Not even his closest friend, Semyon, had heard from him. Tatiana acted as if nothing had happened, setting out breakfast and reminding me to iron my blouse. Oleg buried himself in the newspaper, mumbling about politics. I barely touched my tea. He's done this before, Tatiana said with a shrug. A little drama, a little silence. He will return once he is hungry enough. But this time, I knew it was different. I skipped school and took the tram to the outskirts, to a place where Misha used to wander when he needed to think. An abandoned observatory at the edge of the forest. I wrapped my scarf tighter and trudged through knee-deep snow. My boots were soaked, my cheeks stung with cold, but I kept going. Inside the observatory, all was dark. Dust clung to the air like ghostly mist. I called his name. Silence. Then, from behind a broken telescope, I saw something. His old scarf. The one with the torn corner. Folded neatly on a wooden bench. No footprints. No sign of anyone. Just the scarf and a feeling deep in my chest, like a scream I couldn't release. I sat on the bench, holding it tightly. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to fall. That evening, when I returned home, Tatiana met me at the door. "You look a mess," she said, frowning. "Where have you been?" I didn't answer. I walked past her, straight to my room, locked the door, and collapsed on my bed. The next day, the school counselor called me in. Apparently, someone had reported that I was distracted and visibly agitated. But I didn't care. She asked about my brother. I told her he was missing. Her eyes widened. "We'll notify the police," she said. But when they came to the house, Tatiana was furious.
"He's not missing," she snapped.
"He is moody. He does this. Do not waste state resources." The officer hesitated, but eventually left. That night, Oleg stood in my doorway. "You care too much," he said quietly. "He will come back. Or he won't. Life moves forward." I stared at him. I wanted to scream. But what was the point? Days passed. Then weeks. Posters with Misha's face faded in the snow. People stopped asking. Teachers stopped looking concerned. Life, as my father had predicted, moved forward. But I didn't. I started dreaming about him. In every dream, he was trying to speak, but no words came out. Just silence and snow, and the sound of his guitar echoing in the distance. One evening, I was walking back from the library when I saw someone standing near the bridge, just past the old theater. For a second, I thought it was him. My heart leapt. But it was only a boy with the same posture. When I got closer, he turned, and the illusion vanished. That night, I went through his old journals. He had filled dozens over the years, sketching music, scribbling poems, writing thoughts he never spoke aloud. And there, in one entry, I found it. "If I disappear, it will be on my terms. No one gets to write my ending but me." I sat on the floor, journal in my lap, and whispered, "Misha, where are you?" But no answer came. Just the wind outside, brushing against the glass like a ghost. And I knew, deep down, that he was still out there. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. Weeks bled into months. Snow turned to slush, then to thaw, and the streets of Moscow became gray and restless again. Yet inside me, winter lingered. Misha's absence was no longer spoken about in the house. His name vanished from conversations like it had never existed. But I never stopped listening for it. One morning, while Tatiana was at work and Oleg had taken his keys to his office in the city center, I found myself drawn to the attic. It was not curiosity that led me there. It was instinct. Dust tickled my nose as I climbed the wooden steps. Old boxes stacked like tombs. Faded rugs, rusting trunks, and forgotten things. Then, buried beneath a stack of photo albums, I found a small drawer chest.
Locked.
But the lock was old, brittle. I snapped it with a hairpin. Inside, I discovered a collection of cassette tapes. Dozens of them, carefully labeled in Misha's handwriting.
Some were music.
Some were dates. But one stood out. It simply read, "Don't listen." Unless you're ready. I hesitated. My fingers trembled as I slid the tape into the old player still lying beneath a dusty wool coat. The wheels clicked. The tape rolled. And then his voice filled the attic. "Hello," he said softly. "If you're hearing this, then I'm probably gone. Not gone as in dead. Gone as in escaped." I froze. He sounded calm.
Tired.
But there was a hidden ache in the way his voice wavered. "I've tried to tell the truth before," he continued. "But no one listened. They said I was dramatic. Sensitive. Making things up." Silence stretched. A chair creaked. He took a breath. "There's something wrong in this house. Something no one wants to talk about. But I'll say it now. So you'll know. So someone will." My skin prickled. "Tatiana isn't who she says she is. She's not our mother. She never was. I heard Oleg call her comrade once. Back when I was a kid. Said she'd done her duty for the state. That she took care of things." I felt my heart thudding like war drums. "I don't know who our real mother is," he said quietly. "But I remember her voice. Just once.
Singing to me.
I was little. And then she was gone. Replaced." A sharp inhale. He was crying now. "I tried to leave once before. She caught me. Locked me in the basement. Said it was for reflection. I thought I'd go mad in the dark. But I made a plan." The tape whirred softly. "I'm not brave," he said, "but I can't stay. Not another year. Not with them. Not with the secrets. If you find this and you believe me, get out too. Please, Irina. Don't let them trap you the way they trapped me." The tape stopped. I sat there for a long time. Frozen. The silence after his voice was like an open wound. When I returned to my room, I hid the tape under my mattress. That night, at dinner, Tatiana asked me how school was. Her voice as sharp as cutlery. I stared at her. Really stared. Her smile never reached her eyes. And I knew. I had to find the truth. Even if it destroyed everything. It began with a single photograph. I had returned to the attic the following day, driven by something that felt like hunger. Not for food, but for answers. Every shadow, every creak in the floorboards whispered something I was no longer willing to ignore. Among the boxes marked summer clothes and old linens, I found a thin envelope tucked behind a stack of tax records. Inside it were photographs. Some were black and white, others faded to sepia. Most were ordinary. Tatiana and Oleg at official-looking events. Handshakes. Smiles too wide. Eyes that never smiled. But one photo made my heart stop. A woman stood beside a birch tree, holding a baby in a red wool blanket. Her eyes were soft. Familiar. Misha's eyes. My hands shook as I turned the photo over. There, in faint pencil, someone had written, "Ludmila." With Irina. April, 2005. I gasped. Ludmila. A name I had never heard spoken aloud in our house. But it echoed now like a bell struck deep in the chest. Was she our real mother? Why had I never seen this photo before? I needed more. I took the photo and crept downstairs. Tatiana was in the kitchen, stirring her usual pot of beetroot soup. Her eyes flicked up when I passed, but I kept walking, calm on the outside, burning on the inside. In my room, I searched every drawer, every folder, until I found an old contact list tucked inside a school enrollment file. Most names were of bureaucrats and colleagues. But one stood out. Ludmila Vetrova. Line disconnected. I swallowed. It might be nothing, but it might be everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what else had been hidden. What kind of life I might have had. Who this woman was. What happened to her. Then, around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps. Not Tatiana's. Not Oleg's. They were slower. Lighter. Hesitant. I opened my door silently and stepped into the hallway. Nothing. But when I reached the end of the corridor, I saw something. The attic door. Slightly ajar. Had I left it that way?
No.
I crept forward, one foot after another, my breath tight in my chest. Inside, moonlight filtered through the dusty window. And standing there, in the glow, was Tatiana. She was holding the cassette tape, the one Misha had made. She hadn't seen me yet. Her back was turned. She stood there, frozen, as if listening again. Then, in one swift motion, she snapped the tape in two. I gasped. She turned sharply. Our eyes locked. For the first time, I saw something cold and bottomless in her gaze. She said nothing, just walked past me, slow and sure, like she owned every shadow in the house. I stood in the doorway, staring at the pieces of the broken tape on the floor. The truth had been spoken. And now, someone wanted it buried again. But I wouldn't let that happen. Not anymore. The next morning, Tatiana acted as if nothing had happened. She prepared breakfast. She swept the hallway. She scolded Misha for leaving his shoes by the door. But I watched her differently now. There was calculation behind every word, precision in every gesture. She had broken the cassette. And with it, any illusion I still clung to about who she really was. I waited until she left for the market before making my move. I rushed back to the attic. Not for the tapes. For the photographs. I needed to know more about Ludmila. I flipped through every document, every piece of paper that might contain her name. At the bottom of a box labeled donations, I found a yellowed hospital bracelet. Irina Vetrova. Born April 13, 2005. Mother, Ludmila Vetrova. The room began to spin. So it was true. Tatiana had lied. All these years, she had worn the mask of mother, while the truth sat rotting in a box above our heads. I stared at my name. Not hers. Mine. The rest of the day passed in silence. Misha was unusually quiet too. He could feel it, the way the air had changed. That night, after Oleg had gone to bed, I slipped into Misha's room and shut the door behind me. He looked up, wide-eyed. "Did you find something?" he asked in a whisper. I handed him the photo of Ludmila. "She's our mother," I said. His lips parted, but no sound came out. And Tatiana knew. She's been hiding everything. Misha took the photo gently, as if it might crumble in his hands. He stared at the woman with the soft eyes, the baby in red. "I remember her," he whispered. I froze. "You do?" He nodded. "I have flashes. Her humming. The scent of flowers. I thought I made her up." The room fell silent, thick with something unspoken. "What happened to her?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't know. But I'm going to find out." He looked scared. But he nodded. We made a plan. We would visit the last address listed under Ludmila's name. It was across the river in the old district, a place people whispered about more than visited. The next morning, we lied. Told Tatiana we were going to the museum for a school project. She nodded absently, too absorbed in her ironing to care. Misha and I walked out into the cold light of day, holding hands like we used to when we were little. But this time, we weren't walking to the park. We were walking straight into the truth. Or whatever was left of it. The snow crunched beneath our feet as we hurried through the streets of Moscow, the chill biting into my skin. We didn't have a plan. We didn't even have a destination. All I knew was that I couldn't stay another night in that house. Not with Tatiana watching, knowing what I had discovered. Misha kept close, his small hand wrapped around mine. He was silent, the weight of what had happened settling over us like the cold. I tried to remember the routes I'd taken when I was younger, the places where I could find shelter, the safe corners of the city. But the streets felt unfamiliar now, as if the city had shifted under my feet. We turned a corner into a narrow alleyway. A gust of wind stung my face, making me squint. I could hear the distant hum of cars and the occasional shout from the streets, but everything felt distant, unreachable. It wasn't until we reached the end of the alley that I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind us, heavy and deliberate. I froze. "Misha," I whispered, squeezing his hand tighter. He looked up at me, wide-eyed, but said nothing. I didn't need to tell him to run. We both knew instinctively what to do. We bolted. The snow made it difficult to keep our footing, but we ran faster, moving down side streets and dodging the lights of passing cars. The sound of footsteps grew louder behind us, too close for comfort. I dared not look back, but I could feel them getting nearer. The figure chasing us was determined. Tatiana had found us. She was relentless. Keep going. I hissed at Misha, urging him to move faster. My lungs burned with the effort, and my legs ached from the cold, but we couldn't stop now. Not when we were so close to freedom. We reached a small park. The trees, half covered in snow, offered little cover. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around for an escape route. The night was too quiet, too still. No one was around to help us. That's when I saw the car, parked near the edge of the park, its headlights off but still clearly visible. It was old, the kind of car that looked like it hadn't been driven in years. But it was our chance. We made our way toward the car, each step calculated, hoping we weren't being followed so closely that we'd be spotted. Suddenly, I heard a voice. A harsh whisper. Irina. It was Tatiana's voice. I whipped around, trying to spot her in the shadows. She was somewhere behind us, somewhere close. I didn't wait to see her. I grabbed Misha's arm and pushed him toward the car. Get in, I ordered. I threw open the door, and we both slipped inside, the cold of the leather seats making me shiver even more. I fumbled with the keys and the ignition, my hands shaking. Finally, the engine roared to life, the sound echoing through the quiet night. We had no idea who owned the car, or if they would be back soon, but in that moment, it didn't matter. We had one shot at escape, and I wasn't going to waste it. The car lurched forward, tires skidding on the icy road. We had to get as far away as possible, as fast as we could. Misha sat next to me, silent, his face pale. But I knew he was relieved, just like I was. For the first time since we left the house, I felt the slightest glimmer of hope. But as we sped through the streets of Moscow, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't escaped yet. Tatiana would come for us. She would never give up. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning. The car sped through the streets, the hum of the engine masking the pounding of my heart. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, the city around us a blur of lights and shadows. But no matter how fast we drove, it felt like Tatiana's presence was closing in on us. I could see Misha's reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear, but he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I could feel it, the tension between us, the uncertainty of what came next. We had to keep moving. We had to get out of Moscow, away from everything that had happened. The city's skyline was receding behind us, the towering buildings now just faint outlines against the dark sky. But my mind was still racing, replaying everything that had led to this moment. Tatiana's manipulation. Her cold, calculated lies. The way she had twisted everything, even the love between Misha and me. She had never cared for us. Not really. My hand tightened on the steering wheel as I forced myself to focus. We couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Misha, I said, my voice shaking. We're going to be all right. I promise. He nodded, though I could see the doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe me, not fully.
How could he?
We had escaped, but there was no telling what was waiting for us at the end of the road. But that's when it happened. The car ahead of us, a black sedan, pulled into our lane, blocking our way. The headlights flashed as they cut through the darkness, blinding us momentarily. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. Stay down, I whispered to Misha, my heart racing. The sedan didn't stop. It accelerated toward us, the engine growling louder. It was a deliberate act, a message. They had found us. I glanced to my left, and there, standing on the side of the road, was Tatiana. Her expression was cold, distant, as though she had been expecting this moment. A cruel smile played on her lips. I could hear her laughter, faint but unmistakable, drifting through the night air. You thought you could escape me? She called out, her voice echoing in the silence. Misha's small hand squeezed mine, his grip tight. He was terrified, and I was too. But I couldn't let her see it. I couldn't show her weakness. The sedan drew closer, its headlights illuminating the night, casting a ghostly glow on everything in its path. Tatiana stepped forward, her step slow and deliberate, each movement calculated. She wasn't in a rush. She knew we were trapped. "Get out of the car," she commanded, her voice like ice. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on me. But I wasn't about to give up without a fight. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling. Misha watched me, wide-eyed, but he trusted me. He had to. The door swung open, the cold air rushing in. I stepped out of the car, standing face to face with Tatiana. Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of triumph and something darker. Something that sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't get to walk away from this," she spat. "You think you can just take Misha and leave?
No.
You're mine, Irina. You always were." I stood my ground, even as the fear clawed at me. "You've lost," I said, my voice steady, though every muscle in my body was screaming for me to run. "You've lost, Tatiana." She laughed again, the sound hollow, like an empty promise. "You don't understand," she said softly. "It's not over. It will never be over." I didn't know what she meant by that, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I was done with her. I turned my back on her, pulling Misha's hand and walking toward the forest line, where the shadows swallowed us whole. I didn't know what we would find there, but I knew we had to get away. And so we ran. The forest swallowed us whole, the thick trees casting long shadows over the dirt path. Every step felt heavier, as though the weight of the world was pressing down on us, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let Tatiana catch us.
Not now.
Not when we were so close to freedom. Misha's breath was shallow, his small hand clutching mine tightly. He was terrified, and I couldn't blame him. I was too. But I had to be strong for him. We had come too far to turn back. The sound of the sedan's engine still echoed in my mind, the low hum of it haunting me as we ran deeper into the forest. I could almost feel the eyes of Tatiana on my back, could almost hear her laughter cutting through the air. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. We had to keep moving. "Stay close, Misha," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder. "We're almost there. Just a little further." I could feel the exhaustion settling in, my legs aching with every step. But we had to make it. We had to outrun her. We had no other choice. The moonlight barely broke through the canopy above us, casting an eerie glow on the forest floor. I could barely see the path, but I trusted my instincts. We had to keep going. Just as I thought we were safe, just as I thought we had outrun her, the sound of tires on gravel reached my ears. The sedan had followed us into the forest. "Tatiana," I muttered, my heart sinking. We were running out of time. There was no more hiding. No more running. The car's headlights flashed in the distance, illuminating the path ahead. I could hear the engine grow louder as it drew closer. "Misha," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to hide."
Now.
Without waiting for him to reply, I pulled him toward a cluster of trees, the thick underbrush hiding us from view. We crouched down, holding our breath, waiting for the inevitable. The sedan stopped just a few feet away. I could hear the crunch of gravel beneath the tires as the car came to a halt. The engine cut off, and everything went silent. I held Misha close, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had feared. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, each one making my heart race faster. I tried to stay as still as possible, not daring to make a sound. Then, out of the silence, came the voice I had dreaded. "Irina," Tatiana called, her voice dripping with malice. "You can't hide from me forever. I will always find you." I held Misha tighter, my eyes scanning the darkness, praying that we wouldn't be found. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, the distant chirp of crickets. But I knew we couldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, she would find us.
She always did.
But then, just as I was about to give in to the despair gnawing at my mind, a figure appeared in the distance. The silhouette of someone approaching, someone who didn't belong.
A man.
Tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the darkness, but I could feel his presence. I didn't know who he was, but I could tell from the way he moved that he wasn't here to help Tatiana. The footsteps faltered as he came closer, then stopped altogether. Tatiana's voice rang out again, more desperate this time. "I know you're here," she spat. "You can't escape me."
Not now.
But the figure didn't speak. He didn't make a sound. He just stepped forward, and the sound of his footsteps was drowned out by the rustling of the trees. Without warning, a shot rang out through the air, sharp and deafening. The sound echoed in the night, sending a wave of panic through me. Tatiana screamed. The sound was horrifying, full of pain and rage. I held my breath, not daring to move, even as the silence returned to the forest. Misha's hand trembled in mine, and I squeezed it gently, trying to reassure him. The figure didn't move. He remained in place, his face still hidden in the shadows. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know if Tatiana was still alive, or if we were safe. But in that moment, I knew that something had changed. We were no longer running from the past. We were free. I stood up slowly, pulling Misha to his feet. We didn't look back. We couldn't afford to. We kept walking, the distant sound of the shot still echoing in my ears, but we didn't stop. This was the beginning of our new life.